all the fuss is about.
Yeah, I want to get married, but more out of
Do you want to get married?
yeah, I want to get married, but more out of necessity of like producing a male heir is really the whole point.
No, I'm just listening. I'm just observing. We can keep going. Continue.
Just like we can keep going.
No, because I mean, I would prefer to get a handle on what you think from your mouth.
It's very
before I
Chinese
say
of him, though.
anything.
You know, just only men, so he doesn't want any female children. It's very Chinese.
Yeah, no, I think they're awake on this question. You know, I mean, as far as like
Well,
marriage
it's more
goes.
about population control there rather than getting
Well,
rid
and
of women.
it's like the old world stuff about like a dowry and like gendered stuff and all that. But at least for me, it's sort of like a pride thing. Like I want to produce a male heir to take on my name, take on my legacy, and all that. And marriage is sort of pursuant to that goal. But I don't know about this whole prospect of like living with a woman for the rest of my life. Like it sounds good at first. It sounds like kind of fun or interesting. You don't have to do laundry. You don't have to worry about kind of taking care of the house. But then the prospect of just like it goes on and on and on, and decade after decade after decade. And I don't know how thrilled I am with that whole idea. I'm kind of a solitary individual. I like my privacy. I like my autonomy, and just the idea of like nagging GF, nagging wife. It's a little nightmarish to
Do you
me.
have a good relationship with your mom?
I love my mom. Yeah, I love my mom.
Is your mom a stay-at-home mom? What does she do?
Yeah, so she works now, but when me and my sister were growing up, she raised me. She quit her job to stay at home and raise us.
And what's your sister like? Do you know with her?
Yeah, she's my twin. She's probably the opposite of me. She's more calm, sort of introverted. Yeah, but we get along.
Do you respect women?
Of course.
But you just don't want them to have any rights.
Well, I didn't say that. I
Okay.
didn't say they shouldn't have rights.
But if I'm understanding your question correctly, if you don't want them to vote or drive or have an existence akin to what they would have in, say, Saudi Arabia, you would say that in large part, then they don't really have rights.
Well, I would say probably the ideal something more like Afghanistan, if I'm being totally honest. Like
And so what's the
recent
difference between
Afghanistan.
Afghanistan then and Saudi Arabia?
Like the brutality. I guess,
Recent
slightly more brutal. Of course, Taliban rule, not American rule.
What the fuck? Did he just say that he would like women's rights to be like they are under the Taliban rule? That's a little fucking insane, dude. And to like a woman's face? The balls. His brain must be mush.
I'm talking about recent
So you
Afghanistan.
want women to have the same treatment as women have under Taliban rule in Afghanistan?
Something approximating that, yeah,
Okay.
because you think about the Taliban and what they're able to achieve. Here you have these guys with nothing but some light arms and rags and 20 years, and they were able to defeat the largest military in history. I think that has something to do with the fact that they weren't like distracted. They weren't distracted with the kinds of things we are in America. They weren't being nagged. They weren't being bossed around by women. And now they've got this society where there's this brutality, like I said, this old world sort of order. And you bring up like voting. I don't see really voting as a right, if I'm being totally honest. Like it's not just women. There's a lot of people that really shouldn't be voting anymore.
Such as?
Maybe people that don't own property, young people that work like retail jobs. Like as an example, really, well, hear me out.
People work retail jobs.
Well, or
Okay,
like
I think
service
we all
jobs.
on board with that national movement.
People who work retail jobs shouldn't be allowed to
I was
vote?
earlier, and a young man helped me who's actually a fan of both of us, who was super lovely, and I would like him to vote. He was great. He was very clever.
Well, the thing about retail or these service
Every goddamn person in this country should be able to vote. It should be like fucking mandatory, honestly, and it should be a fucking holiday. I want everyone to vote. We got like 72% or something for the 2020 election. I want to get that number fucking higher. I want to fucking boost that number the fuck up. Everyone should get the vote. It's important. These people control us. So we should vote. Go vote. Everyone.
jobs. It's like, you look at these young people, it's a lot of millennials, Generation Z, and they really don't know how things work. You know what I mean? Like if you own a business, if you own property, even if you're a homeowner, you kind of have an idea of like how things work, like where things come from, and some idea of like how the economy works. And if your whole life is like, okay, you're in school, you're a student,
if you
pay
want to
rent,
change
you know what I mean?
it.
Like you don't even manage like how your apartment runs. Like how should you have a say in how the country is run? You don't even really know how anything comes together in society. So the old way in America was that it was, of course, property, white men. It was a very narrow group of people that were able to vote, and that's because the founding fathers didn't really believe in mass democracy, universal suffrage. They believed in checks and balances, and kind of voting was a part of like checking the power of the ruling class or the regime with the power of the people. But they weren't under any illusions about this idea that like every person should have a vote, one man, one woman, one child, one vote. They didn't believe that. So that's not how the country was founded. That's not how the system was set up, and that was for a reason. So I think it was a big mistake in the past 100 years to just open it up to everybody. We have to think about how we're gonna have competent government and who's gonna make those choices, and we have to think competent people should be making those choices.
Who
If I were to ask
couldn't
you, let's
vote back then?
Let's start with access to something very simple. Let's go to amendment. Let's go to 19th Amendment. Right? Let's start there. Let's
Okay,
just start
okay,
there.
all right,
go on,
What
day
do you
one.
thought? All right, day one gone.
It shouldn't be there.
I have a question though. Have you ever lived in any other country besides the United States?
Nope.
Okay,
Just
so when
America.
you talk about many of these things, these are just from an observational standpoint where you've done a lot of reading and observed a bunch of things,
Yes.
and then arrived at your conclusions based on that.
Yes.
But you have no practical experience living under, say, a more authoritarian rule.
No, well, I mean, I already live under something like authoritarianism in America. I'm on the no-fly list. I'm being persecuted. The thing is about authoritarianism is it can't be condemned in itself, because the character of the regime isn't really authority. The authority is colored by the people that are in authority.
Not to interrupt you, sorry, but just to back up for a second. So you're currently on a no-fly list based on the authoritarianism that's going going on in the country.
Right.
Now that authoritarianism you could argue is from the left, and the left are very happy that they have that authoritarianism. So what you want is right-wing authoritarianism.
Yes.
But your issue is with left-wing authoritarianism.
The problem is not authoritarianism. The problem is leftism.
What about the people on the left who think of you and go, I don't want to live under his rule of law? Because obviously there are people who don't think like
this
you
is
do.
the essence of politics. This is the essence of politics, is that there is us and there is a them. There are right-wing people and there are left-wing people.
Hate a
People
world
have varying
where
identities with different
Nick
levels of salience.
Fuentes
But yes, the problem is that
has
we are not in
what
control
was
of the
going
regime.
on.
Ultimately, the problem is not the regime itself for power, because the thing is, and this is the problem, is that conservatives are sort of naive about power. Power, is not, we're not getting rid of it anytime soon. This idea of like, take over the government to let everybody go and free the people. It's like there will always be concentrated, centralized power. And the question is, well, who's going to wield it? Are we going to forfeit the playing field to the left? This is essentially what conservatives have done because they're averse to rule. Like when conservatives get in control of Congress or the presidency, what do? Do they go aggressively like the left does and wield the bureaucracy and wield the Congress? Or do they kind of just, well, we're going to cut your tax?
If anybody ever looked at what has happened since the 2020 election, said that the Democrats have control, is brain dead. Is absolutely brain dead. I mean, besides the fact that they've been trying to pass the Build Better plan for pretty much most of this year, they barely have control, if you can call it that. And on top of that, we have Manchin and Cinema blocking things every chance they get. So I don't know how you could ever say that the left is in control of the country. It's insane. It's coping.
Taxes, we're going to do this and that, and then the left comes in with a vengeance, and they say, we're going to use environmental regulations to take your gun rights, and we're going to use the IRS to go after, conservative nonprofits, and we're going to do this, we're going to solidify our rule, and then we are going to set the tone for the country. And conservatives then, even when Trump gets into office, it's like, what did we accomplish in the first 2 years? When we had Congress, we had the courts, we had the White House, we did a corporate tax cut, barely repealed Obamacare. That's about it. We should have built a wall, we should have went after the endowments for the universities, we should have targeted left-wing institutions, we should have opened up the libel laws and went after the media. So, conservatives just aren't playing the game. We've got to wake up to the reality of power politics, engage, and play. And so back to the original point, the problem is not that there is power, that there is authority. There will always be authority. There has to be authority. The question is who is going to wield it. And, right-wing people have to do that, which is why I said earlier, if Trump became the Caesar of America, hypothetically, if he had got in 16 and said, you know what, I'm not leaving, and the courts tell me that I have to leave, well, I'll disobey them, and he went full, Andrew Jackson, I would support it. I wouldn't say, this is authoritarianism, this is in principle wrong. I would say, this is a right man for the job, this is a rightful ruler of America, and, and I would be okay with that.
You bring up Caesar, but didn't that end pretty poorly for them?
No, the empire.
The empire ended pretty poorly, I think.
Yeah, after hundreds of years.
Well, we've been around for about 400. How many we got left?
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's just it. The Roman Republic was around, and then it gave birth to a true empire ruled by Caesar, and then they reached their zenith under the empire. So I don't necessarily think that's the worst thing in the world.
I just find it interesting though that you're promoting these ideas having not ever lived under them. I just find that that's such a it's hard to say let's paint the entire house blue when you've never seen a blue house.
Well, I mean, do I need to go to Russia to?
Yes, probably.
Why? I mean, why?
I mean, I'll give you an example. A very good friend of mine who I've known for about 10 years used to be very much like you actually. And he's someone who used to really prop up authoritarianism. He still believes this in part that people do need to be governed to a large extent because people left alone are morons. And that's not saying necessarily that I disagree with. I think the average person is probably as dumb as a bag of rocks. However, he moved to Singapore, which you could argue is not the worst place in the world. Obviously, it's quite clean. People follow the law. The crime rate is reasonably low. But after about 2 years of living in Singapore, where they knock on your door, and this has happened to him, where he got dumped in by his neighbors for having water on his balcony, and they said it's causing a mosquito problem. Now we're at your house, prepared to fine you over mosquitoes. He said to me, I hate living in this country. I hate the authoritarianism here. I hate the way that things operate. Because coming from Australia, he's an Aussie. He was like, I much prefer the way that we do things back home, or at least the freedom that we have. And living in a country where that's staunched in some capacity was really and is and continues to be very bothersome and trying for him. And so I just find it interesting though that you've only ever lived in the United States. I just you can only do so much reading before practical experience actually should take some sort of precedence. And I mean, I say the same thing about women too. I mean, I dare say from my understanding of many of your viewpoints, you also promote the way of interacting with women. And I go, have you been in a relationship with a woman?
No.
So how are you telling other people how to behave towards women when you yourself have not had any actual physical interaction with them in a romantic capacity, or in fact in any capacity where you uphold them in a way that treats them with respect? I mean, if you're out here arguing that women are basically half the value of I'm not going to put words in your mouth because that's not right. But if you are looking to some other regimes around the world that do think that women are half the value of a man, I have to question what kind of a person who's had no experience with women is in a position to basically promote these ideas.
Well, I'm having experience with women now,
believe you
and
said
I've had
that
lots of
out
experiences
loud.
with women in my life, not romantically per se, but I've talked to enough women. I've been I've known enough women to know sort of what's going on. I think any man who is observant enough, and honestly, like I said, we could go back to great geniuses, we could go back to people that have been in relationships. Like a perfect example is like the pickup artists. If you ever notice the pickup artists who have the most relationships with women and the most sex, what they say is that really with women, it's the same bag of tricks
Yeah,
to seduce a woman or
guys.
whatever. And I think that kind of tells you something about the nature of women. That you go from woman to woman, it's the same kind of little tricks, little things you could say or whatever to kind of hack them and whatever. And I think that kind of says it all about their nature. So
What does it say about our nature?
well, it says that they're not fully rational. I don't believe that like men they possess a sort of full rationality. I think that
Rationality towards what specifically? Or
rationality
just
entirely,
generally?
sort of objective.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't think they're capable of that. I think that a male has a real impersonal sense of rationality and reason. I think that a female sense is far more personal, and that derives from the fact that women are made to bear children. Women are made with their wombs to bear children, and so I think their whole consciousness is basically it's wrapped up, it's bound up in this idea that they've got to carry a child and then raise a child. And I think that the impersonality, rationality, objectivity suffers from this. But in any case, to get back to the original question, which is about experience, I don't think that I need to live in Russia to know that we would rather have right-wing people running America than left-wing people. I think that's kind of an asinine sort of thing which people like to trot out and they say, well, you haven't, we could qualify with all kinds of things, but the way that we live in America is unacceptable. I mean, there's homeless people everywhere. The crime's out of control. It's a corrupt country. It's a failing country, and we want to have
countries
confidence.
around the world
So
that have
mad.
right-wing leadership still have many of those issues, and in fact, they're exacerbated oftentimes by the governments that are in power. So, and I would say too, I mean, I think it's a bit of a straw man to say that what I'm arguing here. I'm not even arguing, I'm just posing questions really because I'm interested to hear your viewpoints. However, I'm not saying, I mean, I agree with you in the sense that we should have, right-wing leadership. I prefer to live under a right-wing government, so to speak, although I'm more on Eric's side of things these days. is from edging closer and closer towards anarchism. But, you know, I'm not suggesting that I would rather a left-wing government over a right-wing one. I'm simply saying, having never lived under the autocratic rule that you seem to be promoting in some capacity, I'm having a hard time understanding how you can say that this would be the best way to go about doing things when you actually have no practical experience. That's all
Where
it
do we
is.
see? I'm wondering
That's
right
all
now,
I'm
where do we see Christ-based, like, theocratic? Isn't that more what you're for? Is like more like a
Theocracy?
monarchy?
No, you're talking about theocracy.
No, but not necessarily just theocracy. But I'm just saying, like, in some way with authority.
Like Iran.
I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
You mean like
yeah,
Divine King?
but I'm saying that's Muslim. Yeah, but like a Christian version of, let's just say, yeah, maybe a Christian version of Iran, but not the exact government system. I'm just saying, like, where do we actually see that? Because I could just be sounding like an idiot here, but I don't know if we have any of that sanctified or left in its own original state of like a Christian autocratic type of rule. Do we have that? I don't know where we have it.
Not
Like, on a large scale,
not in this day and age.
Poland kind of, but not really. Like, that's
It's
what
more
I'm
like Hungary. More like Hungary would be more comparable because, you know, Viktor Orban, who's not perfect, but he's very good. You know, in Hungary, he articulated, I think a few years ago, he gave a speech at a university and talked about a new Christian nationalism in Europe as opposed to, you know, other forms of nationalism or other kinds of democracy. And articulated, and it's not quite, you know, what I'm talking about, sort of autocratic rule inspired by religion, but it's a closer approximation of that. But you're right, we don't really have that. And is this a symptom of modernity? Is this liberalism? It's probably been, you know, 100 years since we've had any kind of meaningful Christian autocratic rule anywhere in the world. And you know, all you have to look at is the experience of history. You know, this experiment of overthrowing the kings and overthrowing the gods, it's been a complete disaster. I mean, think about how Europe and America used to be 100 years ago. I mean, it's no contest compared to the kind of scum and degeneracy and the awful things that we see today. And all that we want is a restoration of that. And I'm a real conservative in the sense that I don't believe that we're going to get to heaven.
So he wants Taliban rule. And he wants us to go back to the fucking Dark Ages? How does anyone, I wasn't around for this dude being on YouTube, but how does anyone fucking take him seriously? He said out loud he's never fucking had a girlfriend or dated anyone. No wonder. He sounds like the worst. But he wants us to live under a Taliban-esque authoritarian rule with a right-wing government. And these kinds of beliefs are insane. Absolute fucking nuts. Holy fuck.
On this side of death, right? So I don't know that we're going to get to it's not I don't know we're not going to have a perfect society, but it's a question of what kind of a society are we going to live in? What kinds of problems do we want? Do we want to have the excesses perhaps of a Christian autocratic rule and sometimes the cruelty or things that come with that, or do we want to live in the environment we live in now where mankind is killing itself? You know, people are not having children and it's sickness and depravity and children are being harmed and corrupted. I mean, I don't think it gets very much worse than where we are today, outside of some exceptional circumstances in history. So to me, that's really the real. It's about what kind of society, what's the character of the country we want to live in.
What I will say is that I agree with Nick on the sense that, yeah, when leftists get power, unlike what the conservatives do, they are full steam ahead, and they will punish their political enemies. They will rule over them, and I think it got that way, and that's just not really to my point, because of this long-term sort of infiltration process where they got basically hold of every single institution, and now we just
conservatives are so fucking like sad and whiny.
Where I differ is more so because I don't see the conservatives as okay wielding it and doing nothing. I think of it more as, to me, and maybe this is just through my lens, in that they ensure the power structure of leftists, and they set them up for success to then fuck us over. Let's call it what it is. And again, when I say punish their political enemies, I want to be direct and I want to be clear.
I think
see
it's
them
the
as
other way
direct
around.
here, considering all the subcultures that I'm involved in, and they're
Maybe
controlled by
that's
leftists,
the
and they've
way
run the bitches to the ground
shit-
for as long as I've been alive. It's just been accelerated over certainly the last decade. But I would much rather, and going back to my original point of like pulling the rug certainly from under them, because yeah, I can understand that at least in our lifetimes with government, it may be present in this geographical area. Is that going to be difficult to get away from? Potentially. However, I do think the scale of that can certainly change within our lifetimes. I do think that that's certainly achievable.
But I am saying that on the side note, you were noting because yes, we have special buttons and we can chat to each other on the show. Is that Sydney doesn't know anything about you really besides what she's heard on there, and she's like.
And I do want to say, like, I've said I do know many of your views on women, which I find abhorrent. I'm going to be honest. I don't agree with you in any capacity on that front for obvious reasons.
Figures.
But I actually went into this reasonably like not really knowing your broader, views on things, and so I don't really have an opinion of you, if I'm honest. And so that's why I mean, it's really funny. People are like, Sydney's really triggered, and I'm honestly just sitting here just listening and just getting a feel for things. But I was saying to Elijah, it's interesting. I think you're being very respectful, and I think that's really nice because people make you out to be this assassin that's going to just stab everybody in the face. And I think you are being very respectful, and you're obviously very polite in person. But dude, your followers are very interesting people.
Yes.
And I find it interesting how you appear certainly one way in person, and I would say you're nice in person, and then in the chat I don't understand. Are you aware your followers are like this?
Well, they're very animated, very enthusiastic. The thing is that the thing about our people, me and my followers, is that we are really oppressed in a big way. And so you really can't divorce this from how we are. I mean, when you take a look at my followers, Roypers or somebody like myself, I mean, we really have been treated unfairly by society. And, some people say, hey, your followers aren't very polite, or, they're very rowdy.
I think it's more than
like
that, Nick, though. I think that they, like, for example, they attack Elijah personally, they attack me personally. I don't
There's a
think
phrase for being called groiped, right? Am I
That's
right?
I don't think that, I mean, you can extend this into other people who've been horrible to you personally, and that's completely fair. If
Right.
they, want to go for them, fine. But if I'm just asking you questions mainly to dig into your viewpoints, which I think is a fair thing to do on a show like this, I don't know why anybody would turn that into a personal attack. Now, I don't care. Like, do whatever. Like,
I think the word you're looking for is pieces of shit.
well, I mean, it's just like I don't get it. Like, and if you do think we're oppressed, which is
yeah, but that's
fine,
what I'm getting at. Is that that's why there's sort of a defensive posture, is because
Sure.
you know, if you look at my experience and the experience of people that I know, it's you know, being subject to horrible lies and slander, and so
But Nick, all
you
of
know,
us
that's
are
how
though
it
in this
goes.
space. I
Yeah,
mean,
not really
like,
quite on
actually
the
being
same
a
level.
terrorist. Dude, the stuff that he's been exposed to, I mean, like, he's on the same level as.
But I did have a federal credential, so I did. I'm curious. Did you read how
Yes.
he got rid of Twitter's ADL
Yes,
expose?
I did actually. Yes, I did see
Trying
that.
to say this, so like I know you're explaining this, so I really am not trying to get in the way. But what is so interesting was that if you read the ADL thing and you laugh at this too, like I started to think about this of why Nick Fuentes is evil, right? So like, 'cause, like I know that this is what everybody does. And the first time I interviewed him, I got this whole email with all this shit I had before I introduced him. But it's like everybody's always like, oh, Nick's evil. Like the reason why people think he's evil and like go on that is because the gatekeepers that hate him, people are afraid of pissing them off. Because when you really look at Nick's like life, people are like, but he's an anti-Semite. And so first of all, but no, but people say this, right? It's like, well, why? And it's like he made this joke about cookies and the Jews, and I go, okay, I don't know about you, but I'm not a bitch enough to actually care about that. Like I literally the humor thing, like people always say, well, I wouldn't say that.
I want to
said
ask what
that.
this is, but
well,
I don't talk. No,
no,
you should write it.
yes, I'm saying, no, but I'm saying,
Show me afterwards.
it's like, okay, so
I don't know what that
no,
is.
but if you wouldn't say it, then just don't say it. But if you really think someone's evil because they made a joke, and then it's like, well, yeah, but you're not supposed to question that. And it's like, well, I come from the intellectual movement where literally you can question anything. And it doesn't mean that it's, you know, that anytime someone's trying to say that you're immoral for asking questions, or clearly have bad motives, are ignorant, or a part of something, whether it's the pandemic or climate change, let people ask questions. And it's so funny because when I read the ADL defamation article about him, it was like 90% of the things that they said about him that were evil were just like normal mainstream conservative like ideas of like he questions the election and he believes in right-wing authoritarianism, and it was like he believes the right wing should be the only wing. And then there's like the only part that's like probably different than the average person is that he's made inappropriate jokes on camera versus people have probably made similar jokes off camera. And I read it and I was waiting for it to be like called for arms, called for terrorism, called for the Ku Klux Klan to be reinstated.
no,
called for
I'm
lynching.
pretty
I went through
sure
this article
he's
so in depth, and it's basically the end of it,
literally
this
a
guy makes bad
fucking
jokes and he says
Nazi,
sarcastic
but
things,
okay.
and he also doesn't know if Biden was there because of votes. And I like read it, I'm like, this is the worst hit piece on this guy. And then I realized, but like you say, it occurred to me, go, why everyone thinks Nick is the worst guy in the world is because of the way his followers act towards people, and they can't disconnect. No, but I'm saying, like, they can't disconnect because they hear things about you that are exaggerated, but then they interact with, like, you get Groit and they get these people, so they assume they connect, like, Nick is just trying to, like, infiltrate, hurt my life. But when people meet you, like, shit, it's like, this is actually not who I thought I was about to meet. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a polite, amicable. I'm a human being. You know, I'm a human being. I'm a free thinker. And you know, ultimately, my job is to provoke. Like when I decided to do my show, I wanted to do something novel. You know, a lot of people when they were my age or even my age now, and they start a podcast, they want to start a podcast and they want to do like the Ben Shapiro show too. Like I'm going to do a show and say the same things that Shapiro does, or the same things that, you know, their favorite commentator does. And my idea was, well, I want to go and say what I think. You know, my original thoughts, my thinking. And I think that it's so boring. The expectation that we're going to be in media. We're in this
His
disastrous time right now,
original
catastrophic
thoughts,
time.
okay.
We're all supposed to go on here and just say, hi, well, great to be here. I love low taxes and I'm a conservative and all this kind of stuff. And like the idea of my show is like, let's be provocative. Let's play devil's advocate. You know, when I say things about like we should be more like the Taliban, you know, it's partly joking, but there's also partly truth, and that's sort of meant to suss out and antagonize, interrogate the truth, and arrive at maybe, you know, if we can think about the world in a different way, in a way that, you know, maybe we don't think about usually, in a way that some people think is abhorrent, maybe we could arrive at something more true, certainly something more interesting. And I guess that's the biggest problem is, you know, I don't want to say that my whole life, you know, of course I'm self-righteous and I'm fighting for a cause, but a lot of it is just mischief. A lot of it's just fun. A lot of the things that I do and say, I do without thinking sometimes because they're funny, because they're interesting. It's like, you know, what if we just run with this, like the Cookie Monster thing or whatever. I'm not the kind of guy that says, you know, oh no, we can't say that on this show. That is reprehensible, you know, because we're all adults, we're all in this life, and I think you have to have a sense of humor about it. And that's just one of the things that they weaponize. If you have a sense of humor, if you have any degree of authenticity or realness.
Shapiro was really mad about that.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
but,
like,
but to your
Hold on,
point, like,
no,
go ahead.
so hold on a second there. I'm sorry to shush you.
Go ahead.
I get what you're saying, like making jokes and being funny, or at least trying to get your, trying to antagonize people. That's one thing. There's plenty of people who do that. Like you're not the first person to try it. And obviously you're quite successful at it. But I would say, I mean, don't you think to some extent that polarizing people doesn't reach? If you really want to get your point across, and you really want to change people's minds, and you really want to push this agenda that you have here to push, because obviously you have strong feelings, and obviously you care about the trajectory of America, probably even the planet, and you do care about right-wing values, and you do care about conservative values. Do you think that perhaps to some extent polarizing people who otherwise might listen to you is maybe not the best course of action? Because if you obviously there are people who are going to love you regardless, right? The people who automatically agree with you, think fantastic. I'm a lot of them in our chat at the moment who really think you're wonderful. But then there's a bunch of people who might, you know, warm to your ideas if you weren't saying like, yeah, let's do this, that, and the other, you know, things they might find inaccessible. Like I guess I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but you know, in my opinion, the truth is polarizing. You know, when Jesus came, he said, "I came to divide people. I came to bring a sword. I'm going to separate people in their own houses."
Oh,
and you know, I think it's kind of
Christian,
equivocating,
dude.
like, well, I understand your
I mean-
perspective, but you know, listen, I think this kind of equivocation that people does is actually doing more harm than good because it obfuscates the real truth. You know, I come on my show, it's raw, it's uncut, like the truth is, and I'm giving it to people, I'm delivering it to people, and they might not like it. Some people, I think it resonates very strongly, and they like that. The biggest problem is the people who are righteous in this country, I think, are too timid. You know, they don't have the boldness, they don't have the courage to alienate people. You know, particularly with conservatives, they want to be liked by everybody. You ever notice this? Liberals don't care if conservatives like them. Conservatives really care that liberals like them, and they talk in such a way that they want liberals to like them, and they want women to like them, they want black people to like them. You hear conservatives talk about race, and they're tiptoeing around it, very delicate, walking on eggshells because we don't want to offend the black
Do
people.
they?
And same thing with women.
I'm
Well, we got to
pretty
be delicate
sure-
about it. We don't want to offend the women.
That's
and you know, I think a lot
so
of this is because
weird.
of the society that we live in, where you've got to sell products
I'm
to
pretty
a
sure
mass audience of people from
conservatives
different
just
races
wanna
and different genders
trigger
who live in a mass
the
democracy, and
libs.
you've got to win all the votes. But me, as somebody that is strictly an entertainer and a truth teller, I'm really unconcerned with the sort of popularity of my personage or my views.
It's like
I'm about
the
going in there
online
and saying what needs
loud
to be said. And if people are
conservatives.
influenced by that, and they want to go and play that game and equivocate, and they want to say, well, I think what Nick is trying to say is, you know, they can go and do that, but I'm really more, to me, my concern is just getting that message out there and getting the truth out there. And people, I think, should be more concerned about telling the truth, being real, being raw, being within
Group
than
is
sort of
louder,
overthinking into this sort of
dumber
self-conscious, like, how are we going to cleverly maneuver and
conservatives,
strategize? Like, I'm just going on my show live every night and saying, listen, here's how it is. I'm independent. I'm a free thinker. I'm not paid by anybody. I don't have to worry about sponsors or whatever. And here's the real deal. And so that's my philosophy.
You know, Alex Jones said something similar, but he also came to learn that the power of what he was saying influenced other people. So while you may be a little more rational and measured, it seems as though the following you have built doesn't understand when you're being satirical or you're making a joke. So you have concerns that maybe they're going to ruin your message.
Not really, only because, you know, I really have no control over what happens after I tell the message. And, you know, once again, we can get caught up in
But
like,
isn't it your movement?
yeah, it is, of course.
So shouldn't you have some sort of control as someone in favor of authoritarianism?
Well, I mean, I control like an organization and I control the messaging that comes from me and from my show. But as far as like what my followers take from that, I can't control how people respond to it or how they interpret it. And I don't necessarily think that's the responsibility of an author or of a
You
speaker
do
or something
have
of a truth
some
teller.
level
It'd be one thing if I was a
control
politician
over
or something, or
your
if I
fan
was leading a
base.
club, you know, if like my club member, if I was leading like, hi, this is the Groiper Club, members only, and some guy was out there saying, hey, you know what, you know, he was a representative of something that I led, that would be one thing. But, you know, me going and doing my show, I don't even know who's watching it. It's there's a mass audience online, and they can take that and do what they will. And the most that I could say is clarify my views where there's ambiguity or where people are taking it out of context. But I think it gets away from the duty and the obligation in this time of people to tell the truth. The onus is always on the truth teller. We live in a corrupt society of lies and deception. And whenever anybody tells the truth, it's like, well, but that's offensive. Well, but don't you think that's not really strategic? Or don't you think people are going to mistake that and take that out of context? It's like, I'm more worried about the fact that we're in this empire of lies, and we got to tell straight up and to some degree have faith in the message and have faith in people that it's going to go and do what it needs to do.
I'm interested why you say that you and your following are oppressed.
Well, I mean, just take a look at what's happened to me in particular over the past 5 years. I mean, I'm probably the most censored person in America or in the world. I'm so thoroughly banned. I talked about this on Slightly Offensive. You can't even search my name on TikTok. Like, I'm banned from TikTok, and you can't search Nick Fuentes. It says that's a hateful term. I made a music playlist on Spotify for the summer. Songs, Miley Cyrus, Radiohead, whatever. And they banned the music playlist because I made it. I'm banned from Twitter, Facebook, every social media. I'm debanked. They closed one of my business checking accounts last week. Didn't even tell me. They just sent the account balance and a check in the mail. I logged into the app. Your account doesn't exist here anymore. I'm on a no-fly list. And then you add
They
to
took
that.
your money. The feds took your money.
Yeah, and then the Fed seized $500,000 from me earlier this year. So, it goes on and on. And it's also in the conservative movement. Like, I'm also on the blacklist for CPAC. My name is on a list at CPAC.
Yeah,
I can't enter.
that's whatever. They're gay.
Yeah, they suck.
They're gay.
I'm not really missing
That's
anything.
there.
One
I
party
mean,
with Lady MAGA
The
and
people who run
Caitlyn Jenner.
CPAC, I don't know.
This is
Blake
Eric's
Wickett-
wet dream. What? A weekend with Lady Gaga?
No.
Your face is just so.
He's like, I'm gonna say, like, it actually makes me laugh because this is actually the true statement. Is that's why when you actually listen to Nick, not just out of context, it's like you listen to like Eric and it almost sounds like the same thing. Obviously, with different, like you said, different variations of the right wing, so slightly different. But it's like it is true though. This is why sometimes it's like sucks to be a white commentator. The shit you can get away with when you're black, like it's like literally Sav was just like on the show, like I get in trouble, get a strike, like anything, like for I say anything, and Sav was just like on the show, like, you know what? I'm a bigot, I'm a homophobe. I don't there's like a couple gays I like, and overall I'm just done with these people. And I was like, literally would get a strike if I was like make that claim. But Sav was like, someone's watching like little brown woman. It's okay, you're oppressed. You can say what you want, and that's like the funniest shit. It's like even when you go on like we were talking about like the black people on Twitter talking about genociding the white population, and it was like that just stayed online. It was like, all right, whatever, that's completely cool. I have a video playing it on YouTube, and I'm like, that's cool. Keep that one up. It's on this show. And then if you mirrored that, like if you're a white guy and you just like say half the shit that Brandon says, like Brandon just says stuff, I'm like, all right, we can get in trouble for this.
Apparently not.
No, but it is.
Well, do not
but it is-
tempt fate.
No, no, no. What I was gonna say is like this is what's interesting is that like with Nick, it's that
No, but I still want to know why the audience is oppressed.
that's what I'm
Why
saying.
are
Wait,
they
that's what I'm saying about the oppressed thing is that the attacks, like we were talking about this, that you are a target, and once they choose that you're a target, then they'll just do everything to make an example of you, and that's what I think the oppression was. Is that it's like, look, Nick made some Jew jokes, he has some opinions on Israel, and he said the N-word on his show. So we're gonna make sure that everyone sees that if you step out of line, we're gonna use this guy as an example, and we're gonna say the Groypers are the equivalent of Nazis, and now it's like even if you're black or you're a Jew or you're part of it, doesn't matter if you're a woman, it does not matter because we're gonna make this group the example, and so we'll take away every part of your humanity to interact in life, and they use these people as examples. So it doesn't matter if Eric said the same thing that you said, you're gonna get in trouble for it, not him. For whatever, it doesn't even matter if you're white or male, whatever you can say, simply because now Nick Fuentes is the target and the example and the scapegoat on the right wing, even like where his name's like a curse word, where people, I mean people told us we're retarded for having him on the show because if it's like preening someone on, it's like, oh no, like busting flames or something like that. Who gives a shit?
Well, at the end of the day, I feel like there's ideas, right, that Elijah has that I disagree with. There are ideas that actually I don't really disagree with a ton of your ideas. You're pretty good, Eric.
I like you guys.
Yeah, Eric, I like when you're here. I sit here just nodding. But no, there's things that as people even on the right wing, we'll disagree amongst ourselves. And it's funny because yes, do I think some of your ideas are not my favorite? For sure. And I would hope that they would never be enacted because I think that they would be disastrous in practice. But that's okay because they're not in practice as yet. But the thing is that I've never understood this entire deplatforming and depersoning thing because at the end of the day, the reason why I'm prepared to ask you questions and legitimately just hear you out, because like I said, I had no basis of who you were until just now, is because if you've got a shit idea, then we can shoot it down with a better one. And vice versa. If I have a shit idea, you can shoot it down with a better one. Fine, fair enough. But I am interested. Why I get when you say oppressed and the fact that you have been depersoned, I think is disgusting what's happened to you. And I think it's disgusting what they've done to Laura Loomer. I think it's disgusting what they've done to Milo Yiannopoulos because again, if you have ideas, shoot them down with
Owen
their ideas.
Benjamin.
There's tons
Yeah.
of there's tons of people. The fact that like even when Chase Banks started just closing people's accounts, they did that to Laura Loomer. It's revolting to
I
me.
remember that started a lot of
I'm
James
banned
Alsop got
from
too.
Uber, and that is very annoying.
Yeah,
That is very annoying being banned from freaking Uber. I'm just like, that's the only place I'm
What
banned.
are you all banned from?
I
How
want
many
to
things
know
are
why
you
your
banned
audience is
Literally
oppressed.
everything.
I
Why
wanna
my
know,
audience
why
is
are they oppressed?
because first of all, we have attitude. We've got we're real sort of like Groypers with attitude. I think that's kind of what people like about us. Firstly, I'll just say, some people say, oh well, the Groypers are too antagonistic. I think that's the reason why people like them because we are energetic. We're not like these baby conservatives that are they show up to these college Republican meetings with like their pocket protector and they're like, I really like Josh Wally and I like common good originalism. And Groypers are like, it's America first, bitch. And like we like that. But the reason why they're oppressed is these are young guys. These are young, virile, like in so many cases, teenagers, 20 something. A lot of people think they're mostly white. There's a lot of Hispanics. There's a lot of black guys. They're mostly guys. And their whole lives they have been oppressed. They've been oppressed by their parents, their libtard parents, their parents are divorced, overbearing moms, oppressed by the education system, oppressed by the media. Everything's been taken from them. Their movies, their video games, the women have been alienated and turned against them. Everything's been taken away. And the big problem I think where the antagonism arises from is then you've got this conservative establishment, which is not. I wouldn't say it's the people in this room. I don't see a lot of establishment in this room. But when you see a lot of these pundits or people on Fox News, excluding of course Tucker and other places, they sort of talk down to these people and tell them that the real solution is something like learn to code, get a job. Men just aren't doing their part. Like for example, when it comes to the women conversation, it always comes back to men just aren't good enough. You need to put down the video games and stop doing this, and it turns into this sort of nagging thing. And so the reason why my followers particularly are hostile to the conservative establishment, it's sort of like we're in dire straits, young men, and the people that supposedly represent our side don't represent us and don't appreciate us and are not really talking about our real problems. And that's where a lot of the antipathy comes from. And I'm sort of like an avatar of them. I'm like them. I'm of them. I'm just another one of these Zoomers, just more talented and a genius. And so they see me as like as an avatar who has been, I've thrown myself into the machine, and people see what's been done to me, and it's sort of like they feel it. They see it, they relate to it, and they feel it. And so it's sort of like me. It's like I'm Joker, in like that movie.
He's
But
a
again, I guess my thing
fucking
too is sort of like-
genius.
Yeah, it's Joker.
Sort of like I was saying before, though. I mean, take someone like me, for example, right? The way that I got into politics was through men's rights. And that's something that I really care about because I love men and I care about them being treated fairly, particularly in the court system and particularly when it comes to fatherhood and what have you. And I really care about that. And these are things back in Australia. I've had marches. I've contributed a lot of money to the issue. Like I've done things that I think might help push the envelope. And I talk about this a lot on my channel. with some of your views, again, you might alienate a lot of people who would otherwise be ready to support you and your followers. And if you are oppressed like you think you are, then you are alienating particularly women. There's so many women you don't realize who really, really wants the best for men. And I simply don't understand this. Oh, you know, let's sort of push women to maybe the corner in some capacity. When, like, again, otherwise people like me and other anti-feminist women are like, yeah, cool, like, let's fight for men's rights because we care about that.
Yeah.
I mean, is that not problematic?
This is problematic. I mean, see, this is kind of, but see, this is why I have to be the way that I am, because I break the mold. If you want to watch a show that, what you're asking for is pandering. If you want
No,
a show,
I'm not.
you kind of are.
I'm asking you, is it not? No, because framing is everything, right? You can promote an idea that might be inaccessible to people when you say, yeah, we should just cuddle the tails off the cats. And people go, no, that's animal abuse. That's a horrible idea. But if you come in, you go, look, it actually helps with this, that, and the other, and you actually provide reasoning for many of your viewpoints, people go, actually, that's actually not so psychotic. Yes, I can get on board with that. But if you're like, yeah, but women, this or I actually, you know, because again, I don't have any sound bites from you saying things about women, so I'm not gonna put words in your mouth. But if you do have some sort of bizarre opinion towards women that might not be based in reality, but rather from, I don't know, maybe a negative experience, maybe trauma, I don't know what your background
What about all the things he said about women at the beginning of this fucking interview?
And trying to bash people because they don't 100% align with you. I don't understand how that's pushing the envelope or helping anybody.
But that's, we're not bashing people
Dude,
because
do
they
you
don't
read
align.
the stuff that your people say? And
But
they make it personal too. They're not saying you've got a shit idea. They attack you as a human being.
See, this is what I'm talking about. It's just sort of like this, like, don't you think that's problematic? Like, don't you think like, women like me? It's like, you know, listen, we don't have time for political correctness. We don't have
It's not
time
about
to
being politically correct. It's
pander
about
to the feelings of women.
50% of the
We're not
population.
demonizing them. Listen, we are more
Do you read
based
your own
than
comments?
anybody.
Do you read your own comments?
I read my comments.
So you're aware of how these people feel about
Yes.
women's just the example. I'm sure that they have
Wait,
different
actually,
opinions towards
I
other
want to cut in here and say this. This is actually important. This is what actually what my wife knows. She's a good woman. She stays at home. She doesn't want to work. I think she's a very she's why I wanted a wife, right? I think it's kind of actually what you said for a woman. Like I was joking.
No, no,
Like,
just wants to make a bunch of little children. And
yeah,
then-
yeah, but
like,
it's like
Epstein,
but
Jeffrey Epstein, you just want to
no,
clone
but like I don't really
Yeah.
think that men and women were really made to be
maybe a couple
friends.
years they could be able to just drop your sperm into a thing and then a baby will be
I
born.
think
Like,
required.
You could do that already.
Much
but,
better, yeah.
Yeah, but
Much
my
better
point was, what I thought was interesting, especially with like young dudes, is I went to a convention for the American Populist Union in Florida. And what was interesting was these are just a bunch of young dudes. One thing that my wife noticed was that because she had to stop by and bring me something that I'd forgotten, a piece of sound equipment or something like that, is that she was saying like while she stood there was that the young boys seem to be not like they seem to be anti-women or bitter at women rather than like, hey, I'm gonna actually, like you said, like I'm gonna live a society where I'm gonna make money and I don't believe in egalitarianism. I don't think women and men are traditionally friends in the way that society says they are. And I don't think that husbands and wives have to be friends in the way that you think they are. And that there's a place for women. And even traditionally when couples hung out, the men hung out together outside and barbecued and did whatever they went to the gentlemen's club, not the current strip clubs, but like actual male spaces, and women had their own female spaces, and there was this together but separate, ideology. And she was saying she just goes, I'm just nervous, right, as a woman that like rather than men trying to become strong men that would attract a traditional woman who wants to stay in her place, that it becomes a movement like she was saying that is just about being anti, like it comes across anti-woman, not pro-traditional woman.
Right.
And that's all I think she's trying to say. I thought it was a fair observation from my wife of like, like not that they need to create the space or every cars for driving, they don't need to have women in here, they don't need to invite women, they can ban women, who cares? But she was just saying that like a lot of these young guys she spoke to were just like, shut up, bitch, you're a woman. Rather, which is fair if you're like 21, but when you're like when you start to get older and you want to
When
reproduce
you're trying to like, quiet bitch.
You think?
Excuse me.
Well, what I'm saying, you actually take the authority and not just like say you have it. It's like you live it out in your real world with your wife, and you actually provide her the home, and you give her the place and the position to be in her place. Type of things. Like women should be in their place. Well, your job is to provide that place. Like we're supposed to marry them and give them the home so that they have. You want them to stay home. Well, who's giving them the home? It's a man who knows what the fuck he's doing. So like it's like I see that instead it's just like a woman need to be somewhere. Well, what? Where are the women going to share? Your bedroom in your mom's house? Like where are the women going to? You want them in the kitchen? Which kitchen? Who's giving them the kitchen? And like that's what I worry about too with some of these like younger movements. It's very based and cool, but not always based in reality.
Imagine
I think it
like
is based in reality because again, you have to. It's
Can
all
women
contextual,
not
which is to
buy
say that
their own
look at the
houses?
society that we live in, which is like this insane, shrill, shrieking feminist society. And
Can
it's within the
women not
context of this, where
rent
my
their
show
own
is a place where it's like
apartment?
men talking about women, how we really feel, not pandering to them like they're a voting block, not pandering to them like we necessarily need their approval or need to win them over or something. My show's a show for men. Politics, in my opinion, is really the sort of it's a domain of men. And I'm speaking to men politically on the nature of the
No,
role of women.
fuck
And the sort of
that.
attitude towards
But
women
if
is
you don't know
let's see here. Can I finish?
Of
I mean,
course,
I've heard this now.
yes.
The point is really to sort of tell men about the place of women. And you're right, Elijah. Men need to put women in their place, but first we've got to destroy this pedestal that women are.
Imagine like sitting across from a guy who's saying that you shouldn't be doing your job, like your current job, because it's not your place. And then like taking that with a straight face and like smiling and then being genuine about like your responses back to him. It's kind of disgusting how like um how with open arms like conservatives are about like people in their circles. Like I think you should be selective of the people you let into your movement, not to the point of like the online left virtue testing, but like the the Republicans have a problem with like the far right infiltrating them in in America. So like and like I don't know what to tell you. Like it's insane. It's absolutely fucking insane.
are put on by honestly both like feminists as well as simps, because there's sort of two sides to it. On the one hand, you have these like male feminists that say like, oh, women are the same as men, and like, hey, you go girl, if anything, I'll be the one in the kitchen. And then you've got these simps that are like, milady, she's more pure than me, she could do no wrong. And it's like, well, let's think about how ancient people thought about women. Let's think about how people hundreds of years thought about women. They didn't idealize them. If anything, in the 19th century, they thought that women were more promiscuous and women were more sort of primal and animalistic and less rational and these kinds of things. And they didn't see women as like divine, the best thing in the world. They saw them as like they reproduce, and that's kind of their play in society. And so my show is with a mind towards basically destroying this feminist frame, and that goes for the whole thing. People come to me and they say, you're alienating people, it's provocative, it's whatever, and that's really sort of intentional in the sense that it's everybody has this liberal, feminist, sort of anti-white frame, and yeah, my show is offensive. It's more than slightly offensive. It's very offensive.
That's why you're not on Blaze TV.
That's right. That's why I'm on Cozy TV, not YouTube or DLive. It's with a mind towards destroying the frame. And I don't know that like if I were the president, I wouldn't be saying shut up, bitch, from the Oval Office. But the point of my show is to really change the whole conversation and change attitudes. And so I don't even have it in mind of like, gee, what are women gonna think of this? Like that. If I were to do that before my show, it wouldn't be the same show. It would be cringe.
But neither of us, Elijah and I do this every day, right? And neither of us when we talk think, is this going to offend women? I mean, neither of us think about, is this going to offend men, or is this going to offend black people, or is this going to offend... No, we
We
just
definitely
say
think
things.
about what we say more than he does, though, I will say, because, like, this, too, is, like, did you stream on multiple platforms, right?
Yeah.
So you know that sometimes, like, where you can take things further than people think you can take them, but you also know, like, the 5D chess thing, kind of like, I mean, clearly, if you become too hot of a target, like, eventually, like, you get a strike, and then you have to chill for a second, because you're like, I gotta chill for, like, a second,
Cool.
get the heat off, and then move in that position. But, like, Nick's in a position, what I noticed is that he's got nothing else to lose except maybe being put in prison or being shot.
Well, but
Which is, like, slightly different.
To Sydney's point a little bit, though, Nick, how is that attitude any different than what liberals are currently doing to the right? In that they're saying we don't care if we offend them, we don't care if we alienate them. We want to institute what we want. We want to break down the nuclear family.
Yeah,
We
liberals
want
are
our
winning.
structure.
Liberals are winning.
So you're saying
So
they have a winning
fucking
strategy. You think that's
stupid.
something we should emulate?
Yes, and not in the sense of the content of what they
This
say, but
guy's
yes, liberals. I mean, liberals.
anything
I should say
into
like
the
Democrats are alienating voters with some of the stuff that they say, but
stupid,
yeah, liberals go
dumb
out there and they say,
shit.
here's a worldview. Like we don't care if this offends. Like how about Seth Rogen and Sarah Silverman? They're putting out this abominable Christmas special. It's just the most Jewish thing
Everyone
I've ever
hated
seen.
it. Everyone hated it.
likes
Yes,
on,
no, and no, it's more than that. It was like over 70,000.
No.
Yeah, 72,000.
Okay.
And they turned off the comments and turned off the likes. All those, Eric
Seth
was
Rogen's
writing on YouTube
unfunny
and
and fat.
but telling them how much he was upset about the dislike attacks that were happening.
Yeah, that's a
You saw that
retarded-
though, right? Like how he
yeah,
came into
yeah.
the defense of that movie because it was like elves flashing Santa or some bullshit. And it was
Yeah.
like disgusting. It's weird. It's also weird too. Like cartoon porn is a weird thing.
Yeah, it's repugnant. And but the point being is like, not that we should emulate that. That's sickness. But
Are they
it goes
talking
to
about
show the sort of
Santa
brazenness.
egg?
Liberals, I hate liberals. Oh, I hate liberals so much. And I'm not liberal. I'm not a classical liberal. I'm not a left. I'm right wing. I'm illiberal. I'm anti-liberal. But the way that they approach this is they're like, we want the moon and the stars. We're coming for your kids. We're coming for everything. We are going to dictate how society goes. And conservatives are sort of like, well, what's your point of view? Well, let's reach a middle ground. And like that attitude is just, it's lethal. Because if we
They're
believe that, like,
not.
we're in the struggle of good and evil, then there could be no quarter for evil. There could be no quarter for these
Yeah, what
sort of like,
about people like me who think that some of your views might... I wouldn't say evil, that's not terminology I would use. What about people like me who are on the right who think I don't like...
are you on the right? Really?
Yes.
What would you say?
I
is right?
think there are
What
more
would you say is
people
right?
that
What do you
think
say?
like
What is right wing? Do you say you're right wing? What does that mean to you?
Well, I certainly don't align in really any capacity with the other side of things, so where does that leave me?
Well, I mean, to get back to the origin of the term,
Is
right,
that
right and left wing comes from the French
alarmingly,
Revolution, the National Assembly.
like,
For people who don't know,
large
the supporters of the monarchy on the right
amount
and the liberals are on the left.
think,
And
like,
it gets to this idea of
Fuentes.
preserving the old way of doing things. What you're talking about, which is, go ahead.
No, sorry. No, it's all right.
It's,
Keep going.
like not the left is not really sufficient. It's a very sort of specific thing about hierarchy, authority, about differentiation, which is something you were talking about earlier. Differences between groups, between the races, between the genders, these kinds of things. And so, I don't necessarily know, and I'm not saying this to be antagonistic, but I think it's presumptuous to say necessarily that we're 100% both right wing or on the same page or have the same definition of right wing. Because you say, well, I'm right wing and you're alienating me, and it's like, well, I
I
would
never said
contest
you're
that.
alienating me, but I would say I disagree with a number of your views, and I would hope that they would never come to fruition, is what I hope. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's to say that this is why I don't call myself a conservative, because by many definitions of the puritan conservatives, if you don't 100% fit in their framework of what they deem a conservative to be, then you are not a conservative, and they will X you out. Fair enough if that's what they
You
want
become
to
a California conservative.
Yeah.
But that's really popular these days.
So I mean,
Call that.
it's I don't know how to answer that question, because I think you need to be more specific when you ask it. But if there's no better term. I mean, you want to come up with a better term for me, fine. But I would say that, believe it or not, there's probably a multitude of things that you and I align on, but obviously the big ones we don't, or several of the big ones we don't. But this is to say that, I mean, just because I'm not a conservative doesn't mean in some capacity that my views
Trying to say,
are.
are you quiet because you agree, or are you just listening?
No, look, I'm not the one to. Y'all know how I operate. I don't fucking get offended at what the fuck someone else says. Definitely because there's no identity crisis suffered here. I know what the fuck I am.
Yeah, so that was the interview with Nick Fuentes, the famous Groiper King. He's a fucking idiot and thinks that women shouldn't have rights, and also has never dated anyone. But that's not surprising, because look at him and his followers. They're like disgusting, and they should all go take showers. Again. And like the fact that she was okay with him shitting all over women that entire conversation, with like the weakest pushback I've ever fucking seen in my life, is just a testament to how like anti-woman like even regular normal conservatives are. Actually, I don't know how like normal conservative that Australian show is. I think it's Australian, I don't know. Anyways, yeah. Nick Fuentes is shit. His fans are shit, and women deserve rights, and please, for the love of God, let's not go to a Taliban style regime. On that note, good night, sleep tight, and don't let the gropers bite.